Hello, my name is Sharayna Ashanti Christmas. I am the founder and executive director of Muse 360 Arts. Muse 360 Arts is a nonprofit that I started in 2004 after I actually founded my dance studio, Rainfall Dance Studio, in 2003. And I decided to create a space and an institution that was rooted in the arts, but more so rooted in child development and youth development. So youth development creatively. And so I have three programs that I created. The first program is the dance school, which is Rainfall Dance Studio. We've started that in 2003. I started at the Druid Hill YMCA. Now we are a resident at UB Blake Cultural Arts Center. And then we have two additional programs, which is Spark of Genius Youth Entrepreneurship Project, which was actually started by two other scholars in our other program, New Generation Scholars Leadership Program. And so specifically, those two other programs outside of the dance school are free programs to the city, to city youth ages 10 and up. So for the creative entrepreneurship program, we focus on not just developing their business acumen, but also developing them as an individual that can use their talents to sustain their livelihood. And then New Generation Scholars, which is our international study abroad leadership program, is an African-centered leadership program in which we travel to study the African diaspora. But prior to that, we focus on using history to shape how we see ourselves as leaders. So we're looking at our ancestors, we're looking at history, we're looking at world history, but like I said, it's African-centered, it's an African-centered thought to really shape the next generation of leaders, social entrepreneurs, thinkers, engineers, so on and so forth. But all of it is rooted in developing the whole child. And we also partner with parents in the community. That is also a very main component of how we work. And we've been around for, this will be our this is our 17th year that we've been around doing programming in the city. So it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. What inspired me to pursue the work of Muse 360 really was my mother, and I would say the universe in many ways. I went to Morgan State. I was working in finance. I used to work on Wall Street. I was working for big companies, and I was not fulfilled. I decided to come back to Baltimore, and I realized that I needed to use my talent to do something. And I thought about how my mother raised me and my brother. My mother is a community activist in New York and New Jersey, and I didn't particularly like that, my mother was in the community. I was like, oh my gosh, my mom is the one that's, always organizing something. She was a community organizer. I didn't see that for myself, but then I thought about also the institution she sent me to. So she sent me to Dance State of Harlem when I was just 3 years old. And Dance State of Harlem is a world-renowned ballet school. The premise behind creating that is kind of the premise why, behind why I created, my dance program and also my other programs. So it's really rooted in how can I go back to the community that I thrive from and support them with my talent. And that's what Arthur Mitchell did. As soon as King was assassinated, he created a program for Black and Brown youth in Harlem to learn ballet, So it's like, why ballet? Because ballet helps to develop not only the body, but the mind. And we add our own spin to it as people of the diaspora. So my mother always instilled in us making sure that we always reach back. So it's the Sankofa theory of making sure you always reach back, right, to move forward. So everything that I do comes from that space. And so again, I have to, I say the universe because I do believe that my ancestors have chosen this work for me, because I can't say that in my early 20s, I would have said, yes, I'm going to be doing this kind of work. So that's kind of how I've thought about it. And I've really been able to kind of culminate this beautiful work with my community and the youth that I serve. When I think about our people, the arts and the creative space is not something that's foreign to us. It's a way for us to move through. It's a way for us to make do. If you grow up as, a Black person in a predominantly Black neighborhood or not, it doesn't even really matter. There's certain, staples that you grow up with. It could be someone in your family sings, you might grow up in the church. It could be, people in your family, they celebrate by dancing, we cook together, we commune together, through through an artistic medium. But in our community, that is not a formal thing to say it's art education or it helps to heal, but it is just something that is known. We have literature, we have, so many different things that kind of help us get through. So it has been absolutely essential to rethink how Muse 360 serves the community and how we develop youth. So yes, our mission is to develop them, creatively through the arts, but we also are encouraging young people that may not see themselves as creative folks, because again, there's a lot of Western institutions that have said, in order to be this high, in order to be developed through the arts, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And we don't believe that. We believe that lives within us. And so we're just here to nurture and kind of bring those talents, to fruition. And so really at the end of the day, the work moves beyond the outcomes of our portfolios as artists, because I'm an artist as well, right? I'm, creative person. It really comes down to how we honor our ancestors through the work of how we treat one another, how we take care of one another, how we make sure that we are all in safe spaces, make sure that we're all able to express ourselves. And that is the environment that I am work to maintain at Muse 360. So it, like I said, it kind of moves past the idea or, the idealism of arts education, because again, if you're talking about being in Baltimore City, which hopefully you're speaking about this, if we're talking about economics, Black folks in Baltimore City, there's some areas that are living below the poverty line, right? So what does art education do for that population if I frame it in that way? Whereas if I frame it in a way where we're taking care of one another and we're healing and we're allowing ourselves to express ourselves through the arts, that's a different way to look at it, because there is that mental health healing that needs to happen so that we can and then there's also the social aspect of making sure that you have food and making sure you have proper housing and making sure your neighborhood is safe. And so all of those things kind of have to come together for us to really have strong outcomes. And so at Muse, I really make a point, even if I go to a panel, if I'm on a board, it doesn't matter. I don't just talk about the arts and education and create. It's like, how are our people being taken care of? Because when they're taken care of, when they feel like they can be taken care of, they express themselves in a much more beautiful, balanced way. Not that art that hasn't come out of some pain and turmoil, it has, but really making sure that we're fostering that environment so that is produced. So that's how I see arts education. My greatest accomplishment with this work is the young people that are now adults that I've hired to work with us. So the dance school is now ran by Felicia Massey, who was a student of mine when she was 17, and now she's almost 30 years old, and she has become a dance teacher. She is now the program manager of Rainfall. Also, the other young people that I've serviced through New Generation Scholars, they are off using the experiences that they've had with New Generation Scholars, having traveled to 11 countries, writing articles for magazines. They've gotten scholarships to NYU and UCLA and Stanford and Morgan and all of these wonderful institutions because of the work that we do. And so my biggest accomplishment is the young people that I serve, watching them blossom and watching them being able to use the skills that they've learned in our programs to be successful. That is absolutely hands down. Having done this work almost 20 years, funding is always a challenge. And sometimes it's also a challenge to get our community to understand the buying power that we have to mobilize community assets. So a community asset would be Muse 360 because we need stuff for our youth, but then it's kind of hard to get the community to understand how to give in a very small way to then maximize resources. So funding is always a challenge, but like I said, like you see, we're still doing it. We're still doing whatever we have to do to keep serving our youth and our community. Baltimore needs a boost because how else are we going to survive? But I think beside Baltimore needing a boost, we need to hold each other accountable. We need to hold the institutions that we work for and we're aligned with accountable, because they are part of that oppression. They are part of the reason why Baltimore needs a boost. If something like COVID happens and you see that it affects certain communities worse, you can't be surprised, because you've put those communities in harm's way. So you put those communities in spaces where there's no food and there's no proper transportation. You put young people in schools with no clean running water. That don't even make bad sense, So when we talk about Baltimore needing a boost, Baltimore City in particularly, it's a no-brainer, but that is a very opaque and open-ended, because what does the boost look like, right? So, that's kind of how I see it. I'm a disruptor, and I'm definitely, I definitely discuss things that make sense, but they're not popular things, and they are very difficult, and it requires sometimes the breaking down of institutions for Baltimore to get that boost. I'd like for our legacy to be centered around how Black folks are able to thrive, and we were a part of that. I'm producing the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs and social activists and educators and artists and creatives. I want those folks to be able to contribute to Black folks thriving. We have to move the needle. This is a predominantly Black city. We don't control many institutions. We don't control many of the assets. So if I'm developing the next generation, I'm hoping that they can continue that. And I want to be a part of that legacy. I want to know that I've supported them in helping them to take their city back. So that's the kind of legacy that I'd like to have, that I'm building.